That night, deep in the silent pine forests of Montana, the cold air clung to the earth like a shroud of death. The pale moon cast a ghostly glow over the dusty ground, and in the distance, the low growl of old truck engines rumbled like predators stalking their prey. Isaac Cole never imagined that a simple trip back to his childhood home would turn into the bloodiest night of his life. But for the armed men waiting for him in the darkness, they had just chosen the wrong target, because this man wasn't just any war veteran. He was a former Delta Force commander, one of the deadliest soldiers America had ever trained. The wind rolled in from the mountains, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and earth. Bozeman, Montana, was the kind of place where time seemed to slow, where neighbors knew each other's names, and where strangers were noticed. It was early autumn, the leaves turning gold and crimson, and the air held that crisp edge that hinted at winter's approach. Isaac Cole stepped out of his old, dust-coated pickup truck and closed the driver's side door with the kind of controlled force that came naturally to him. Deliberate, quiet, nothing wasted. He stood still for a moment, taking in the familiar road in front of him. It had been years since he'd walked these dirt paths. The distant outline of the barn his father built still stood, though the paint had long since peeled, and the roof sagged slightly at the edges. He had been gone for over 2 decades, a lifetime of war and shadows. Isaac was a man carved by discipline, molded by the relentless demands of military life. 16 years in the U.S. Army, and the last 8 as a Delta Force commander. His service had taken him from the heat-scorched deserts of Afghanistan to the frozen wilderness of Eastern Europe. He had led missions the public would never hear about, operations so dangerous that a single mistake could have erased his entire team from existence. Now, he was here, wearing faded jeans, worn boots, and a weathered leather jacket. To the townsfolk, he might look like a man who had spent too much time on the road, quiet, solitary, carrying an air of something they couldn't quite name. What they didn't know was that every step Isaac took was measured, every glance purposeful, every movement built upon years of training to survive in the harshest conditions imaginable. The Cole family farm sat just outside the town's limits. Once thriving, it had fallen into disrepair after his parents passed away within a year of each other. His father had succumbed to a sudden heart attack, and his mother followed months later, her health failing rapidly without her husband. Isaac hadn't been there for either of them. He was deployed on classified missions halfway across the world. The guilt had stayed with him, buried deep beneath the layers of control he had built to survive war. On his first day back, he drove into town to restock the farmhouse pantry. The Bozeman General Store hadn't changed much. Same wooden floorboards, same glass jars filled with candy at the counter. The bell above the door jingled as he entered, and heads turned. In a place like Bozeman, a black man stood out. Isaac could feel the stares, the unspoken questions, but he ignored them. Behind the counter, a tall, wiry man in his late 50s gave him a tight smile. "Afternoon," the man said, voice low. "Haven't seen you around before." "Been gone a while," Isaac replied simply. He gathered flour, coffee, canned goods, and a few other supplies. At the counter, the man bagged his items without another word, though his eyes flickered toward the 2 men lingering by the store's entrance. They were pale, broad-shouldered, and dressed in matching black jackets with a white emblem stitched onto the sleeve. A crude symbol Isaac recognized immediately. He had seen variations of that emblem in villages in Eastern Europe, painted on walls by militia groups. He had seen it on patches worn by mercenaries in the Middle East. It was the sign of people who believed violence was a solution, who defined themselves by hatred. Here in Montana, it was the mark of the Iron Brotherhood, a white supremacist clan that had been quietly growing for years. One of the men smirked at Isaac as he stepped outside, the sound of their low laughter following him out the door. Isaac didn't look back. He had no interest in starting trouble, but trouble, he knew, had a way of finding him. The drive back to the farm took him along a stretch of road where the forest closed in tight on both sides. His mind wandered to his childhood, the mornings spent mending fences with his father, the evenings on the porch with his mother, reading under the dim light of a kerosene lamp. The quiet had been something he once longed for when he was overseas. But now, there was an undercurrent in the air, a sense that this wasn't the same Montana he had left behind. That night, Isaac sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and listening to the ticking of the old wall clock. The farmhouse felt colder than he remembered, the silence heavier. Somewhere in the distance, an engine rumbled, faint but growing louder. His instincts sharpened instantly. He stood, moving to the covey window, pulling back the curtain just enough to see a pair of headlights cresting the hill. The vehicle slowed as it approached the farm, stopping just beyond the gate. Isaac couldn't make out the faces inside, but the silhouette of the driver's broad shoulders was familiar, one of the men from the store. The truck idled there for nearly a minute before turning around and disappearing back into the darkness. Isaac let the curtain fall back into place. He wasn't afraid, but he knew the look in a man's eyes when he had chosen a target, and he had just become theirs. Isaac Cole woke before sunrise, as he always did. The stillness of the Montana morning was something most people found peaceful, but for him, it was a testing ground for discipline. He brewed black coffee, ate a simple breakfast, and stepped outside to check the fence line. His boots crunched on the frost-coated grass, the sharp air filling his lungs. The field stretched wide around the farmhouse, bordered by the dark wall of forest. From here, Isaac could see the tire tracks in the dirt by the gate, fresh, made sometime during the night. He crouched, running his fingers over the compressed earth, studying the spacing. 3 vehicles, 1 heavy truck, 2 lighter pickups. They hadn't come for a visit. They had been watching Dot by mid-morning. Isaac drove into town again to buy a few tools to repair the barn roof. He kept to himself, as always, but the quiet stares followed him. Word traveled fast in small towns, and he knew the Iron Brotherhoods. Reach was deeper than most would admit out loud. Dot when he left the hardware store. The same 2 men from the general store were leaning against a black Ford pickup across the street. Their faces were identical smirks, the kind men wore when they thought they had already won. One of them, a thick-necked man with a shaved head, called out, "Hey, soldier boy, you lost or something?" Isaac didn't answer. He slid into his truck and started the engine, his eyes forward. The less attention he gave them, the better, at least for now. He pulled out, driving down the narrow main street toward the highway. In the rearview mirror, the Ford's engine roared to life. Following, for several miles, the pickup stayed a few car lengths back, never too close, never too far. Then another vehicle, an older green Chevy, pulled in behind the Ford. Isaac's mind calculated routes, distances, and options without conscious effort. This wasn't a casual tale. They were boxing him in. When he turned onto a dirt road toward the farm, the Ford sped up, overtaking him and skidding sideways across the path, blocking his way. The Chevy rolled up behind, sealing the exit. Isaac's hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, his pulse steady. 3 men stepped out of the Ford, 2 more from the Chevy. All wore variations of the Iron Brotherhood emblem, stitched on jackets, painted on baseball caps. Their faces were pale, hard, and grinning in the way predators grinned when they thought their prey was cornered. The leader, a tall man with a scar running from his jaw to his temple, stepped forward. "You're a long way from home, boy," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "See, we don't take kindly to strangers nosing around our town." Isaac opened the truck door slowly, stepping out with deliberate calm. He didn't posture. He didn't threaten. He simply stood straight, his eyes locked on the leader's. "This is my home," he said evenly. That answer drew a ripple of laughter from the group. The scarred man's smile widened. "Not anymore, it ain't. You got two choices, you leave or we make you leave. And trust me, you ain't gonna like the second one." Isaac's gaze swept over them, noting their positions, distances, and the bulges under two jackets where pistols sat in holsters. His voice was low and even. "You want me gone? You're gonna have to try." For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the scarred man's expression hardened. "Boys," he said, jerking his chin. Two men stepped forward. Isaac moved faster than they could process. He sidestepped the first, his left hand snapping to the man's wrist, twisting it sharply. A cry of pain broke from the man's mouth as the pistol dropped into the dirt. Isaac kicked it away and pivoted, his elbow slamming into the second man's throat. The man staggered back, choking. The others froze for a moment, stunned at the sudden violence. Isaac's voice cut through the cold air. "I don't want trouble. But if you bring it here, you'd better be ready to lose more than your pride." The scarred man's eyes narrowed, calculating. He stepped forward, hand inching toward the pistol at his hip, but stopped. Isaac's posture hadn't changed, but something in his eyes told him exactly how fast this would end if he drew. Finally, the scarred man spat on the ground. "This ain't over," he said, backing away. "You just painted a target on your back." The group retreated, climbing into their trucks. Engines roared, tires kicked up dirt, and within seconds they were gone. Isaac stood in the quiet, the echo of the confrontation hanging heavy in the cold air. He knew their words weren't a bluff. They would be back, not with 5 men, but with 15, maybe 20. And next time, they wouldn't come to talk. That night, he sat at the kitchen table, maps and a notepad spread before him. He began marking entry points to the farm, choke points in the forest, and angles where he could control sight lines. This was no longer about avoiding trouble. This was about being ready when trouble arrived, outside in the far darkness beyond. The fields, a pair of headlights flickered once before disappearing. The morning was cold and gray, the kind of weather that kept most folks indoors. Isaac Cole stepped out of his truck and crossed the yard toward the barn. He was halfway there when he noticed the door was slightly ajar. He stopped. He always locked. The barn. Always. His boots crunched on the frosted dirt as he approached. He pushed the door open slowly, his hand instinctively resting on the handle of the knife sheathed at his hip. The smell hit him first, the metallic tang of blood. Then he saw it. A dead crow lay in the center of the floor, wings spread wide, like some dark, twisted offering. A single rusted nail pinned it to the dirt through its breast. Beneath the nail was a folded scrap of paper. The letters, scrawled in jagged red ink, read, "Next time, it's you." Isaac crouched, studying it. The handwriting was hurried but deliberate, the red ink smelling faintly of spray paint. He could almost picture the man's hand shaking slightly as he wrote it, not from fear, but from adrenaline. This was meant to rattle him. It didn't. He folded the note and slid it into his jacket pocket. The crow he carried outside and buried near the tree line. It was a message, yes, but more importantly, it was proof. Proof they had been here. Proof they had crossed the line from intimidation to trespass. By mid-afternoon, Isaac was in town. The diner was busy with lunchtime regulars, but conversations dipped slightly when he walked in. He ordered black coffee and took a booth by the window, where he could watch the street. He didn't wait long. 2 trucks pulled up outside, the black Ford and the green Chevy from before. From them emerged the scarred man and 3 others. They entered the diner without hurry, their boots heavy on the tile floor. They didn't order. They didn't sit. They just stood there, looking at him. "You didn't get the message," the scarred man said. His voice was low, but every ear in the diner caught it. Isaac took a slow sip of coffee, set the mug down, and looked up at him. "I got it," he said evenly. "It's a shame you wasted a perfectly good crow." The scarred man's lip twitched. "You think this is a joke? You think you can just waltz into our town and ignore how things work here?" "I don't ignore anything," Isaac said. "I just don't take orders from cowards." The word landed like a slap. The scarred man's nostrils flared, his hand curling into a fist. One of his men shifted forward, but the scarred man stopped him with a raised hand. "Enjoy your coffee, soldier," he said, his tone suddenly colder. "Because soon you won't be around to drink another." They left as abruptly as they'd come, leaving a trail of tension in their wake. Conversations in the diner resumed, but quieter now, and eyes avoided his. Isaac finished his coffee, paid, and walked outside. He didn't head straight home. Instead, he drove the long way, cutting through back roads and scanning his mirrors. The trucks didn't follow. Not today. Back at the farm, Isaac began his preparations in earnest. First, he walked the property, marking lines of sight from the house to the tree line. He noted the ridges where a man could crouch unseen, the low points where someone could crawl in the dark. Next, he retrieved a weathered crate from the attic. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was his old gear, the tools of a life he had left behind, but never forgotten. A suppressed rifle, 2 sidearms, night vision optics, and a small selection of non-lethal devices. He cleaned each weapon with meticulous care, his hands moving from memory. By nightfall, the farm looked unchanged to the untrained eye. But Isaac knew the truth. Motion-triggered lights now covered every angle. Fishing line was stretched low along certain approaches, and his dogs, old but loyal, were stationed on the porch. The next evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Isaac spotted movement at the far edge of the property. 3 figures in dark clothing moved low through the grass. He watched them through binoculars, their forms slipping between shadows. They weren't coming to talk. He picked up the phone and dialed Sheriff Dalton. The man answered on the second ring. "Sheriff," Isaac said, "I've got 3 men on my land, armed, moving toward the house." A pause. "Isaac, maybe you should just let this one go. These fellas ain't worth the trouble." Isaac's jaw tightened. "If you're not coming, I'll handle it." Another pause. "Do what you gotta do." The line went dead. Isaac set the phone down and retrieved the rifle. He moved to the upstairs window and settled into a crouch. The men were closer now, 30 yards from the fence. He sighted in, not to fire, but to see them clearly. He recognized one, the man whose wrist he'd twisted days ago. The other 2 were new. All 3 carried shotguns. Isaac let them get closer, his breathing slow, steady. At 20 yards, he clicked on the floodlights. The men froze in the sudden glare. One raised his shotgun, and in the next instant, Isaac's rifle cracked, the shot slamming into the dirt inches from his boots. The man flinched, cursed, and stumbled back. "I don't miss twice," Isaac called, his voice carrying across the yard. "You step 1 foot closer, and you won't walk away." The 3 exchanged a quick, silent look, then retreated into the trees. Isaac stayed at the window long after they were gone. He knew they'd be back, and when they came, it wouldn't be 3 men in the dark. It would be war. From the upstairs window, Isaac scanned the tree line through his scope, the crosshairs drifting over shadow and branch. Somewhere out there, men were planning his end. He wasn't afraid. He was waiting. The night air was heavy and damp, carrying the faint rustle of leaves. The security lights he'd installed cast pale circles on the dirt below, but beyond that, the darkness was thick, the kind that could hide anything. Then, a sound, a faint metallic click. Isaac's ears sharpened. That was no branch snapping, no animal moving through the brush. It was the sound of a pump-action shotgun being racked. He shifted the scope slowly, scanning the perimeter. Movement flickered at the far fence. 3, maybe 4 shadows. They moved low and fast, spreading out in a half-moon formation. Behind them, deeper in the woods, he caught the brief glint of another set of eyes watching. The Iron Brotherhood wasn't just sending a few men this time. They were coming with numbers. Isaac eased back from the window, his mind shifting gears into the cold precision of combat mode. Every detail mattered now. Every second counted. He moved through the house with silent efficiency, flicking off the last interior light and locking the rear door. His dogs, restless, padded behind him until he motioned them to stay in the laundry room. From the hall closet, he pulled out a duffel bag and unzipped it. Claymore mines, 2 of them. Old, yes, but still deadly. He jogged to the front porch, placed one just inside the fence line, and wired the detonator to a remote trigger he kept in his vest. The second he planted near the side approach, angled toward the slope where the ground dipped. By the time he was back inside, the shadows had closed the distance. Through the window, he could see their faces now, painted in streaks of black, eyes burning with anticipation. They didn't know who they were dealing with. The first shot came from the left, a wild blast from a shotgun that shattered the upper pane of the kitchen window. Isaac didn't flinch. He returned fire with a controlled single shot from his rifle, dropping the shooter instantly. Chaos erupted. Men shouted, ducking for cover, some firing blindly toward the house. A bullet thudded into the wall near Isaac's shoulder. Another cracked into the front door. He moved positions, never staying in one place for more than a few seconds. From the upstairs hallway, he fired again, one target down. From the living room, another. Every shot was deliberate. Every shot counted. Then, a sudden flash of light from the side approach. One of them had tripped the fishing line. Isaac didn't hesitate. He hit the remote. The claymore detonated with a sharp, concussive blast that lit up the night, sending dirt and debris into the air. 2 men went down hard, one screaming, the other silent. The rest faltered, unsure whether to press forward or retreat. That hesitation was exactly what Isaac needed. He kicked open the side door, moving low and fast, circling around the barn. In the dark, he became a ghost, a shadow among shadows. He caught 2 of them trying to flank the house. A quick, precise takedown dropped the first. The second lunged at him with a knife, but Isaac sidestepped, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting until the blade clattered to the ground. A single punch to the solar plexus dropped him gasping. From deeper in the woods, the voice of the scarred man rang out. "Cole, you think this ends tonight?" Isaac recognized the tone, desperation, wrapped in bravado. He kept moving, using the terrain to his advantage, until he had a clear sightline on the scarred man. But before he could squeeze the trigger, headlights flared from the road. A truck barreled into view, its high beams sweeping across the yard. More men. At least 6, maybe 8. Isaac ducked back toward the house, but not before planting the second claymore at the north fence. He slipped inside, reloaded, and steadied his breathing. The truck's engine cut, doors slammed. Boots hit dirt. He triggered the second claymore. The explosion tore through the night, sending the newcomers diving for cover. Screams and shouts mingled with the ringing in his ears. When the dust cleared, only 3 men remained standing, the scarred man among them. His eyes locked on Isaac, and for the first time, Isaac saw something there that wasn't rage. It was calculation. The scarred man motioned for the others to fall back. Slowly, reluctantly, they obeyed. "This ain't over," he called, his voice carrying across the field. Isaac didn't answer. He just watched them disappear into the dark, their retreat swallowed by the trees. Only when the last sound faded did he lower his rifle. The yard was littered with bodies, spent shells, and the acrid smell of gunpowder. The siege was over. For now. But Isaac knew men like the Iron Brotherhood didn't forgive, and they sure as hell didn't forget. Tonight, he'd won. Tomorrow, the war would come again. In the dim light of his kitchen, Isaac poured a cup of black coffee and stared at the map spread across the table. Every fence line, every blind spot, every approach, all marked. If they came again, he'd be ready. If they didn't, he'd Still be ready. The wall clock ticked steadily in the background, the only sound in the quiet aftermath. Outside, the yard bore the scars of the night, splintered wood from the porch rail, gouges in the dirt where bullets had landed, and the blackened craters where the claymores had gone off. The air was still heavy with the metallic tang of blood and the faint smoke of gunpowder. Isaac's phone vibrated against the tabletop. Sheriff Dalton's name lit up the screen. He answered with a calm, "Yeah? You alive?" Dalton's voice was low, gruff, still breathing. "I'm on my way. Don't touch anything." Isaac almost smiled at that. Don't touch anything. As if this were just another bar fight for the sheriff to sort out. He didn't bother arguing. "Doors unlocked," he said, then hung up. By the time Dalton's cruiser pulled into the driveway, the eastern sky was starting to pale. The sheriff stepped out, his hat pulled low, eyes scanning the scene. "Looks like you had yourself a war," Dalton muttered, stepping past a body lying near the fence. "Didn't start it," Isaac replied. "Didn't figure you did." Dalton crouched to inspect the scarred dirt where the claymore had detonated. "This ain't standard home defense." Isaac didn't answer. He sipped his coffee, letting the silence do the talking. Dalton straightened, his gaze settling on Isaac. "You know this isn't over, right? They'll regroup. They'll come back harder." "I'm counting on it," Isaac said, his voice calm, steady, the same way he'd talk about the weather. The sheriff studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll have to file a report. Can't promise it'll make a difference. Folks in town, some of them still think you're the trouble." "That's their problem," Isaac said flatly. Dalton sighed. "You need anything?" Isaac set down his coffee cup and looked out the window toward the tree line. "Just time." Later that morning, the sun burned away the last of the night's chill. Isaac walked the perimeter again, this time slower, more deliberate. He noted every place where the Brotherhood had breached, every shadow they'd used. For cover. At the north fence, he found a patch of disturbed soil, boot prints, deep and fresh. One of them had been watching long before the shooting started. It confirmed what he already suspected. Last night wasn't a random act. It was. Reconnaissance turned into an attack. He tightened the straps on his vest and went back inside. Word spread fast in town. By midday, the diner was buzzing with talk of the shootout at Cole's place. Some folks spoke in hushed tones, others with a hint of satisfaction. A few just shook their heads, saying he brought trouble wherever he went. Isaac ignored the chatter. He had supplies to buy, extra fencing wire, a few motion sensors, and enough canned food to last a month if it came to it. At the hardware store, the owner, a wiry man named Ben, leaned across the counter. "Cole, I heard what happened. If they're coming after you, they're coming after all of us." Isaac shook his head. "No, Ben, they're coming after me. I'm the target." "Still," Ben said, pushing the receipt toward him, "you watch yourself." Back home, Isaac unpacked the supplies and got to work reinforcing the property. He buried the motion sensors at key approach points, ran new fencing where the old had been blown apart, and cleaned every weapon in his arsenal until the steel gleamed dark by late afternoon. The place looked calm again, at least on the surface. But Isaac knew better. The Iron Brotherhood wasn't finished. They'd tasted blood and pride was on the line. When they returned, they'd come with more men, better weapons, maybe even someone with actual tactical sense. He would be ready. That night, as the crickets began their slow chorus, Isaac sat once more at the kitchen table. The map was still there, but now there were fresh marks, new firing lanes, fallback points, and safe zones. The war was coming, and when it did, Isaac Cole wouldn't just defend his home. He'd end it on his terms. The air was heavy that night, not with the stillness of peace, but with the quiet hum of something waiting to break. The moon was a thin silver blade overhead, cutting through a sky laced with dark clouds. Isaac Cole stood in the upstairs room, rifle cradled against his shoulder, eyes locked on the tree line through the scope. The new motion sensors blinked green across the monitor on the desk. Every few seconds, he swept the yard, listening to the night's rhythm. At 1:13, the first sensor tripped. A faint beep. North fence. Isaac didn't move right away. He just breathed in slowly, exhaling through his nose. A few seconds later, the second sensor lit up west approach. Then another. And another. They were coming in waves. He shifted position, kneeling low, and whispered to himself, "All right, boys. Let's finish this." By the time the Brotherhood broke through the tree line, Isaac had already chosen his opening shot. A figure in camo and a ski mask moved ahead of the others, a scoped rifle in his hands. Isaac's crosshairs rested just above the man's chest. One squeeze, one sharp crack. The man dropped without a sound. Chaos erupted. Shadows scattered, muzzle. Flashes flaring in the darkness. Bullets tore into the siding of the house, kicking splinters into the air. Isaac moved like water, flowing from window to window, never staying in one spot for more than 3 shots. His training guided every motion, controlled bursts, clean angles, smooth reloads. Downstairs, one of the tripwires snapped. A claymore roared, shredding the silence with a concussive blast. The men behind it screamed, then fell silent. Still they kept coming. Isaac knew this wasn't just an attack. This was the Brotherhood's attempt to end him for good. But he had no intention of being ended. Switching to his shotgun, he moved down the stairs, boots whispering against the worn wood. The front door shuddered under the weight of bodies trying to force their way through. Isaac stepped to the side, leveled the barrel, and waited until the hinges groaned. When the door burst inward, he fired twice, the blasts cutting through. The first 2 men like they were paper. He dropped low, rolling to the left, and switched back to his rifle. Another man came through the gap. 2 rounds to center mass, 1 to the head. The body crumpled, blocking the entry for a precious few seconds. Outside, a truck engine roared to life. Isaac darted to the side window and spotted a pickup barreling toward the porch, headlights off. It was a battering ram on wheels. He grabbed the grenade launcher from behind the couch, an old Delta Force relic, and snapped around into place. The shot punched through the truck's windshield. A second later, fire blossomed outward, swallowing the cab in orange heat. The vehicle rolled to a stop, flames licking the night. The gunfire slowed. Silence returned in fragments, like glass being set down one piece at a time. The last man standing, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a Brotherhood patch, stepped into the yard. He carried no weapon, just a long hunting knife. "You think you can wipe us out?" The man called, voice rough. Isaac stepped onto the porch, rifle loose at his side. "Not think, no." The man laughed once, short and sharp. "You kill me, others will come. They'll find the same thing you did." Isaac's tone was flat, almost cold. The man lunged. Isaac's shot was quick, precise. The body hit the dirt and didn't move again. By dawn, the yard was still. The Brotherhood's trucks were abandoned, their men gone, dead or fled into the woods. Sheriff Dalton arrived just after sunrise, his face pale at the sight. "You did all this?" he asked quietly. Isaac didn't answer right away. He was staring at the rising sun, the light painting the treetops gold. "Had help," Isaac finally said, tapping his temple. "Years of it." Dalton exhaled slowly. "I'll call it in. Can't promise folks will see you as a hero." Isaac looked at him. "I'm not here for their approval." That afternoon, Isaac walked the property one last time, repairing what could be fixed and burning what couldn't. He buried the bodies deep in the far field, marking nothing. When the work was done, he sat on the porch with a fresh cup of coffee. The air was clean now, the breeze carrying only the smell of pine and damp earth. The war was over. At least for now, he didn't fool himself into thinking the world had run out of enemies. But Isaac Cole had sent a message, one written in Fire, smoke, and blood. If you come for him, you'd better not miss Dot, and if you did, you'd never come back.